listening to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. Before we get started, make sure you connect with us on Facebook and on Instagram. Just search at Range Minded Podcast to find us. Or if you want to email us, you can do that too, podcast@iishooting.com. This is episode 107, where we talk about the life lessons that the shooting sports have taught us, like situational awareness, safety, mechanical. In fact, we discovered that a lot of life skills you can pick up from getting into the shooting sports. As always, thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy episode 107 of Range Minded, the life skills you can learn from the shooting sports. Hello and welcome to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. My name is Mark Long, and as always, I am joined by
the ever cool Steve Zimmerman, all the way from the other side of the state.
I know, it's amazing technology now, you know.
And it's like it's amazing that we can still record this far over the landscape while there's so many other people online sucking up bandwidth.
Yeah, what was it Netflix and Hulu were saying that they had to get extra servers or extra internet or whatever because they had to.
Well, I heard they dumbed down their quality. Maybe
that's what it was. Yeah,
I know they did it in Europe, but I don't know if they actually ended up doing it here. They dumbed down the quality to open up some of that bandwidth because so many people were watching.
Right, there's so many people, sitting at home and everything, and so are we still.
Yeah, but it's slowly opening up. It's kind of nice.
We've got a phased plan now, which is good, and. Actually, I think a lot of states have phased plans open now, so that's definitely a good thing.
My one complaint, and it really does irk me beyond all right now, is I just filled out my absentee ballot.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I would sure have rather been able to go to a booth.
Yeah,
I think if I can go to Walmart and stand in line with a bunch of people, I should be able to use a voting booth.
Sure.
But, I mean, it is what it is.
Well, absentee, I will say, is more convenient anyway.
I guess, call me old-fashioned. I like the nostalgia of...
I feel you, but I was going to say there's nothing like actually being at the ballot box either, so it's one of those rare things.
Watching that ballot slide into the locked box when I know nobody else can play with it.
That's right, and you've done your due diligence.
Yeah, but...
your civic duty, but we're not talking about that today.
No, and I was just going to say, it is what it is. There's no use complaining or hating about it. It is what it is, so we got to make the most of it. Otherwise, we go crazy.
Yes, that's true. So, but with all of the time inside and stuff, I've been a little introspective and just thought about, had a lot of time to think. And one of the things I was thinking about lately was all of the life skills that I think being in the firearms world and having firearms as a hobby and being in the shooting sports has afforded me. I think I've learned a lot of life skills that are kind of applicable overall to life. Nice. That I can attribute, some of which to shooting.
Sure.
So that's what we were going to talk about tonight is the life skills that the shooting sports can teach you.
I like it.
So I'm sure you probably have a few as well.
Yeah. And I think as we're talking, I think maybe some more things will come to fruition. Maybe even some of our listeners will be like, "Oh, I've never thought of it that way before." That is kind of intriguing.
Yeah, and actually, we'll probably say this from the get-go that if you have, if something comes to mind that you have learned and applied to your life that you've gotten from the shooting sports, let us know. Facebook and Instagram at Range Minded Podcast, and you can email us podcast@iishooting.com.
Oh yeah,
we're always around. So, but what is
always? I'm
curious. What's the first thing that you thought of when I brought this up? Did one thing pop into your mind?
Yeah, the very first thing that did pop into my mind was just having more of an observant mindset, not being in the white anymore, but staying more in the yellow. I guess to take Cooper's color codes into effect.
Yeah.
And I've noticed too that's moved across to my son as well. So I think we've talked about this before. We'll go to the mall. Well, not right now. We'll go to the store or somewhere like that, and we're more observant to exits. We're more observant to people, behavioral. It seems like more people are agitated anyways. Maybe that's just perception than reality. But you go to Walmart and I notice I'll be looking at people's hands more. I'll be looking at, their facial expressions or their body language a little bit more in depth. And I know a lot of that comes from classes with Adam.
Sure.
Because we talk about a lot with telegraphing and stuff in his classes. And then just some of the defensive handgun classes I've taken about just being more ready than not.
Yeah, for sure. Situational awareness was definitely the top one on my list. I've always liked to think that I've had at least a general idea of what's going on around me, but definitely learning about situational awareness and concealed carry and all that. And when you have the responsibility of carrying a firearm, it really does, I think, automatically, at least it should, make you more situationally aware.
Yeah.
And so
and you know what I've noticed? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you out.
Oh, you're good.
But I was going to say what I've noticed too is like, and I'm human. I still fall into that trap of like, oh, I wonder how many likes I got on my comment on Facebook. And I'll pull out my phone like I'm standing in line or something at the grocery store or whatever. And then I have to consciously tell myself, put it away and pay attention.
Yeah.
Like if I'm telling people they need to pay attention, then why am I not paying attention?
Well, nobody's perfect, but it's the fact that you can say that and you can have that alarm bell go off in your head. It's like, okay, I should put this away, blah, 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 blah. Some people probably don't think about that at all.
Yeah, that's true.
But what I was going to say was, what I've seen is that how many people are not paying attention. That's the scary thing to me is when you're situationally aware, and after you especially when you first start kind of paying attention to what other people are doing, nobody is paying attention. And it's kind of scary, but it's at least you can hopefully get, when somebody is paying attention or somebody is acting weird, you can kind of feel it out, you can recognize it.
Yeah. And it really is kind of startling when you hit that awakening point, I guess you could say.
Yeah, to a degree.
And you really are observing other people, and you realize, and I think I've talked about this before too. Last summer or something, we went to the mall, and my son and I don't want to walk around the mall like the girls do. So they'll go into some store and we'll just sit out on one of the chairs in the big aisles, and we'll just count how many people are on their cell phones.
Oh, it's probably everybody.
It is almost, it's probably 98% of the people are walking with a cell phone in their hand, not really paying attention.
Man. Yeah, I believe it.
It's amazing.
Yeah, same thing in Walmart or even driving.
Yeah, well, yeah, unfortunately, yeah, a lot while driving. My daughter was telling me the other day that somebody they knew that they have a newer SUV with the big screen, and then maybe it was an aftermarket radio.
Sure.
But they bypassed the safety measures so the driver could even watch the movie on the screen.
Oh my gosh, seriously?
That makes total sense, doesn't it?
Oh my God, that's insane. Yeah, people want to do whatever they're doing except for actually paying attention to whatever they're supposed to be doing. But yeah, having that situational awareness and just even being able to maneuver through crowds, because most everybody else is still on their phone anyway.
Yeah.
But being able to just know who's in front of you, who's behind you. Same thing with driving or not anytime lately, but concerts or any kind of big, events like that. You always, I feel like I can move around those kind of areas and stuff better,
Which is interesting because think about all the surveillance. For some reason, side note, sorry, ADD second, but all these surveillance cameras, right? Like everybody has a cell phone and has the ability to take pictures or video,
right?
But none of them are really using it.
Using it to pay attention, yeah. So
that's craziness.
But the situational awareness and just being aware of what's around you definitely is something that I've been able to pick up and learn and really embrace,
Yeah.
It just makes me feel like I am more prepared just in life as I go about my day. And that's actually one of the other things I put right next to situational awareness is preparedness. It really, especially if you get into the concealed carry mindset, you kind of realize that you go through hypotheticals about what situations could happen, what, is likely to happen, what is kind of less likely to happen, and just to be prepared for kind of whatever situation. Like if you're, driving across the state, for example, if you're going somewhere that you are not familiar with, it may benefit you to be more prepared for different situations,
Yeah. And I think I've seen that too, or felt that in some of my classes that have changed my life. I think I mentioned, man, we're bouncing back all over from years, but back, I guess. But so my first aid class, that trauma class, is by far one of the most favorite classes I've ever taken.
Yeah.
So since then, like I always have 1, 2, or 3 tourniquets. They're always within arm's reach of me, whether it's in my vehicle or in the bag I take to church or whatever. Like shooting bags I've noticed that I carry more stuff like that more frequently. And then I'm also kind of gaming those scenarios in my mind once in a while. Not as much as I used to, and I probably should get back on that track. But you just kind of war game in your mind and imagine if.
Yeah, and what I've noticed is that
I think I can sympathize.
the more training that you get, like, like taking a concealed carry class or like an enhanced class or anything like that, is you start to like realize you don't know what you don't know, and that there are more situations or more responsibilities you might have to deal with that you don't think about until, it's either brought up, hopefully, or heaven forbid it happens to you.
Yeah.
And so just, I think as you get along in your firearms journey more, and especially with concealed carry more than anything else, is that you realize there's different situations, and you have to not only be aware of those situations possibly happening, but being trained to react to those situations.
Sure.
So I just thought that's something that they kind of go hand in hand, because, being situationally aware is probably the foundation of what makes you more aware and more prepared to deal with any situation. But like you said, for example, like with like carrying tourniquets or whatever, I think when a lot of people get into the shooting sports first, they think, oh, nothing bad's ever going to happen. It's not going to happen to me. And then, something happens. Maybe it might not be to you or your friend or something, but maybe it's somebody a couple stalls down, or maybe you're out with some friends or friends of friends or something. And, something happens, and, you'd be wishing you have that medical training at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or even just, I was going to say, just the more you're around too, with people who shoot and stuff, you're going to hear more stories as well, which is going to stop and make you think.
And I guess good and bad, the internet's riddled with, experiences at the shooting range or stories of stuff just like that happening. Like,
yeah.
And when I teach the range safety officer class, it in the curriculum that the NRA provided, it said, shooting incidents are rare at a shooting range. Well, I actually disagree with that. It's more common than what people think of incidents happening. Maybe a lot of them aren't injuries, but there's a higher percentage of actual injury incidents that take place at ranges than what people might want to recognize, I guess is a better way to put it.
Sure.
And so being prepared is at the utmost importance when we talk about the shooting sports.
Yeah. But having the confidence to know that you can handle that situation, because for me, what I started to realize was, like, if somebody brought something up, I'd think to myself, well, oh my gosh, what would I do in that situation? Like, I don't know if I'd be able to be a help at all. I think if I even tried anything, I'd be a hindrance.
Yeah.
And so,
and I think if you're really a student, you'd be honest with yourself about being that way. Like you would be teachable and humble about that point. Like, oh man, I really don't know, and I need to learn.
Right. Exactly. That. Yeah. It was a big impetus to kind of get more training on medical and just anything and everything, basically, as much as you can.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
But yeah, those two kind of go hand in hand with me, or for me at least. Just having the knowledge to know, what you do know, what you don't know, what you need to work on, and then just having the awareness to know what's going on, and you're just around you when you're out in the real world, because that's where you're basically practicing your training and living your training.
Right. And you always want to train the way you're going to fight. And so the first thing about fighting is to avoid the fight. You don't want to be in the fight. So you need to be conscious about everything around you.
Yeah.
And then prepared, like you're saying, prepared for when it may happen, which hopefully it doesn't.
Yeah. And that's actually, you bring up a good point there too, where I think situational awareness really allows you, it gives you more options where, I never saw that guy coming. I had to pull my gun and this, that, and the other. But if you were more situationally aware, or paying attention, you'd know that there was an exit that you were able to see. And I remember Bill brought it up in classes and stuff, is that, you have to, prove to a jury of reasonable people that you did what a responsible person would have done. And, they're not going to look at it necessarily the same way that you are in your situation. They're going to think, well, why couldn't they have just used the door right there that was behind them? They didn't think about adrenaline running through your system or this, that, and the other, but it benefits you to be kind of as aware as you can about your situation if anything like that does ever happen.
And the reality is ignorance is never a defense. You cannot defend your ignorance in any way.
Right.
And it really lies on, and that's, we've talked about it many times, I think, and you hear it a lot of times in good quality classes, is where you have a lot more responsibility when you carry a defensive tool, whether it be a knife or a firearm or whatever, that you understand your role in the situation. And if you can leave, you have to leave. Like, it's prudent. And then, but if it's life or limb, then maybe that was just cause to use that tool. It's a big deal. And I still see a lot of people that haven't made that connection of the responsibility of carrying a defensive tool.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that, comes up is that it sounds kind of cliche or whatever, but if you're in the firearms world for a long enough time, you're going to learn some responsibility.
Yeah. Or at least you better be.
One way or another, you're going to learn some responsibility, whether, that's the easy way or the hard way, I guess. And yeah, you do have to really be conscious of that, of, that a firearm is not a wonder tool or is automatically going to save your life or make you the hero or whatever. It's a tool you use to, to survive a situation if need be. Otherwise, it's not doing you any good,
Yeah, and that concealed weapons permit isn't like a deputy sheriff badge either. Like, it does not afford you any kind of other privileges other than, I guess, to exercise your Second Amendment rights a little bit more. And that's a whole other topic that I know might boil somebody's blood over, but it is just simply a permit to carry a firearm or a knife or whatever you might be using as a defensive weapon.
Right. Yeah. And, again, the longer that you're in it and the more I think maybe you get involved, like working at a shop or maybe at a competition or something like that, the more people I think you do end up seeing who maybe aren't so responsible and could stand to be a lot more responsible,
I guarantee it.
But it also, I think it makes you, kind of check yourself where you think, okay, am I being as responsible I can? Am I getting the training that I should be? X, Y, and Z. So.
And it should be making you look a little bit more introspectively to say, oh man, I've been doing this wrong for my whole life. I have to change.
Well, and then another thing, kind of checking yourself is learning about the laws and, the rights that you do and do not have. And, learning the legal ends of carrying a firearm, really getting in depth with something like that is something I think a lot of people don't necessarily take the time to do. But it really helps deepen your understanding and I think solidifies, at least in my mind, the responsibility of what carrying a firearm is like for you, because, you can get that taken away pretty quickly if you're not, acting as responsibly and as a reasonable person would. And like we've said before, if you are, heaven forbid, in an incident, every bullet you fire is going to have a lawyer attached to it.
True story.
And so you,
in some way, shape, or another, you will have to defend what you did.
Yeah. So it's something that, I started thinking about, especially after, hearing about the legal portion of classes and just different stories of people, because you'll go to jail and anything, you, like they say in the movies, and when people actually get arrested, anything you say can and will be used against you. And, even if you had every, intent and you were right all across the board, you might say something that could, be taken the wrong way or incriminate you or something. And,
right.
So it definitely has made me more legally aware. And also just kind of aware of kind of gun rights in general. I think maybe people, they own a gun or they have, maybe they do enjoy shooting, but they don't get into the legal part of it or the the rights part of it, you know?
Yeah, and I understand that that's not for everybody. You know,
Oh,
I
sure.
tend to be a little bit more political than some other people, and that's fine. I don't belittle anybody, and I don't know everything either. Like I know there are people that are way more. I hate to use the word extreme, but that really does fit. Way more extreme when it comes to the gun rights side of it, and I appreciate those people that can dedicate more energy to it. I do what I can as much as I can,
Yeah.
um, but you know there is that side of it that I actually really do like. I like the constitutional side of it, and and I like to do my best to preserve it. So getting to know your gun laws is awesome, or any legal side of it is important.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, if you're going to carry a gun, I think it behooves you to know your rights and responsibilities as a carrier and even as a gun owner in some states, you know, because if you're going to
Yeah.
defend your home or your property, there's going to be some laws that affect you there in one way or another. And
hmm
you got to know
Even
those.
down to storing a firearm,
Yeah,
it can
exactly.
be really difficult.
What else did you have on your list? Anything else came up to mind?
Yeah. So another thing for me, and maybe it's more of the retail side of it, but I guess some of the teaching side of well is it's helped me with my people skills.
Oh,
Um,
sure. Yeah.
Not I'm not terribly socially awkward, but I can communicate with people, and the more you're around it, I guess it's like immersive learning, right? The more you're around it, the easier it is to communicate with people and relate to people.
Sure.
Um, but being behind the gun counter and teaching people one on one or in group sessions really has helped me quite a bit. Um, just to be able to. I don't want to keep using the word communicate either because that's really redundant, but be able to associate and to sympathize and to see things in a different way. It keeps me from being more closed minded if I'm around more people, I guess. And
Yeah.
it that has helped me a ton. You know, being behind the gun counter and selling guns has even opened doors for me that didn't think would ever open. So
Sure.
it,
Yeah.
in that and outside of the gun community, like in my real job, communicating with homeowners and contractors and suppliers,
Yeah.
it's just makes it easier for me in the long run.
Yeah. Well, teaching, I mean, and instructing and even RSOing and stuff, you learn how to, like you said, communicate, but also just help people understand what you're trying to say
Yeah,
instead of just like, I think people who, especially, you know, they're new to guns and they're excited about it. And it happens. They want to talk about their guns and why theirs is the best and how they've gotten to their decision and X, Y, and Z. But I found that the longer I'm, you know, in the gun world, I've kind of made my decisions there and I know what works for me,
yeah,
but I learned that what works for me may not work for somebody else. But something that may not work for me works for them. So at the same time, there's enough right answers to go around. It's just a matter of what
yeah,
works best for you in your situation. And hearing different people's stories of either how they got into firearms and why they like to shoot and this, that, and the other. There's no two stories that are alike, you know?
yeah. And I love that aspect of it. I love to listen to people. I love to hear people's story, and to me that's fascinating. And you touched on something that is really key for especially seasoned gun owners is when you talked about how some people that may be just be getting into it and they're excited about their firearm purchase or a gun they've had for a little while. You know, we may not like it. Maybe that this person all they can afford is a high point or something, and they think it's the greatest gun ever. And and I think it's important as gun owners that we don't belittle them. Say, "Oh, you bought that piece of shit. Whatever. That thing's garbage. You're gonna hate it." We shouldn't. We don't know the sacrifice or what went into that purchase,
Right.
and we need to validate the purchase or whatever they have for them so they can keep enjoying the sport. If we shut people down with whatever they could afford, then first of all we're the bad guy, and they might not want to associate with us anymore anyways, or they might think, oh, they're right, I suck, this is embarrassing, I can't take this to the range
I'm out
or
of my
whatever.
league and I'm never going to make shooting friends or anything like that. Yeah. That's a good
Yeah,
point.
it's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This may surprise you, Steve, but I kind of think sometimes the gun community can get a little elitist.
No, that's no surprise, especially CZ owners.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, just kidding. I like CZs.
Um,
No, you're absolutely right. In fact, we talked a little bit off air about somebody we both know. They get kind of Tactical. We've brought up that term before,
Sure.
where actually, I feel like a lot of those folks, that, or at least there's a percentage of those tactical guys that really have very little training, but they watch enough YouTube videos of the cool guy classes, and they just emulate what they see instead of actually learning it.
Yeah.
And it kind of turns people off. I've actually seen it in gun stores where, I'll be trying to sell a gun and somebody will come up to the counter and they'll think how cool they are, and it just rubs people the wrong way. We don't need to be that way as gun owners. We need to meet people at the same level so we can build everybody up together.
Yeah, I think I think it, in addition to communicating, I think listening, just listening, even if you don't think that they're, that they have it together. I mean, you can help kind of guide them along.
Well, that's part of communicating. Have a conversation is speaking and listening. The majority of a conversation should be listening.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, being in the firearms world for as long as I have has gotten me to learn how to do that better,
Yeah.
So, another thing
as I cut you off,
well, we are a special exception. We can cut each other off. No problem. But kind of going at it another way, from being a student, actually from not being much of an athlete, throughout my life, shooting and being in the shooting sports has helped me kind of learn about like economy of motion and how your body works and how to like really feel how minor adjustments and fine motor skills really can affect the outcome of what you're trying to do. And just the small adjustments and the repetitions that you can do to, make your shooting better, and just everything from, having a proper stance to a proper grip to breathing to, shooting while moving. I mean, there's, 6 million different things that, that are involved in the physical aspect of shooting a firearm and shooting it well and accurately, and really being able to work on those, has really like even helped me like working out, like, cause you can work out properly or work out incorrectly, and knowing like what your body should be doing and how to move it properly without hurting or injuring yourself. Like getting a slide bite, for example, is important.
Yeah. It's interesting. I never really thought about that, but as you were speaking, I thought about just the other day, and maybe you saw the pictures of me shooting my old Sharps rifle.
Yeah, that was super cool.
And I thought about it. I was like, man, you're right. I've had to learn a little bit more about how to control my breathing, how to control my hands in a certain way so I'm not pulling the gun off target. And I never really even, I guess I haven't even thought about it that way. Yeah, that does make sense. That I've had to learn to control my body in a different way, as terrible as that might sound.
Right.
But yeah.
Well, it's you want to keep everything still except for that trigger finger. I mean, you think about the exercise where you put a penny or a casing or something on the front, the front of your gun, and you try to pull the trigger without it moving. I mean, that's basically trying to keep your whole body still and only move one part of your body at a time, and stay as steady as you can. I mean, that's like, trying to make the perfect golf putt. Your hips move and everything else basically stays the same.
Right.
So it's
that makes me think of a story. Last summer, you know who Nate Shellman is, right? So he's a talk radio guy.
Yeah.
And he was at the store, and he put me on the air, and he showed me his target that he shot, and it was kind of all over the place. And
sure.
So I showed him a technique of how to, when you hold the handgun particularly, you can extend your pinkies and touch the points of your pinkies together, and it helps from squeezing that gun as you press the trigger. And he gave me the funniest look. Like he thought I was just giving him some kind of a BS thing just to see if he'll do it.
See if he take the bait.
And well, he took the bait actually, and he showed me the target after. And I wasn't quite sure what to, like, I've taught people that technique before. It's not a new technique. It's been around for ages. And he brought me back on the air like 5 minutes later. He's like, Steve, I gotta tell you something. I was like, oh boy, here we go. And I thought it wasn't going to work. Like I thought I was just going to get totally roasted on the air. And the two targets he had side by side were drastically different. Like, and it just felt good to be like, oh man, I still I still have some credibility. That's good.
Still got it.
That technique, it brought it his grouping in. I mean, wasn't that great, but he's not a big shooter all the time either. But
yeah,
but it definitely it probably reduced the size of the group. I don't know, 40% or so, which
that's
is
impressive.
Still quite a bit.
Just from one thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like my friend Danny, the friend of the podcast. He, he's been getting into shotgun shooting a little bit more. And I think it was like the second time I took him out to go shoot. He was, we were kind of messing around, just shooting the target with a shotgun or whatever. And he was always shooting, I think it was low. And he goes, it's weird because I'm shooting the same place every time. So I'm consistent, but I'm shooting low. And so I took a look and saw what he was doing. I said, okay, well, why don't you try just bringing that shotgun a little closer in center and a little higher up. So you're not resting the whole stock on your shoulder right there. Maybe like the bottom half or bottom third. And he goes,
so he was tilting his head way to the side.
Yeah. And he was forcing his head forward, which was kind of messing up his angle, I guess. And, I raised it up and sure enough, he goes, yep, that was it. Now, then he could, and just like that, he was able to basically shoot a lot closer to where he was aiming at.
Nice. Yeah, we already talked about this. I'm a terrible shotgun shooter.
3 for 100.
Well, it was more than that. It was like 23 out of 100.
Still,
give me some credit.
There you go. Yeah. So 1 out of 4, I guess that's better than me. I'll give you that.
We need to go clay shooting.
Yeah, we should probably get somebody on who's an accomplished clay shooter and have some things to learn and maybe see if we can redeem ourselves.
Yeah, well, I definitely need redemption.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too is that, you could almost think of shooting as almost an interdisciplinary sport because you have not only handguns, but you have shotguns, you have rifles, and you have long distance shooting, you have carbine shooting. There's all different kinds of flavors of shooting, I guess, for lack of a better term, that you can get into,
Yeah. And there is a lot. And plus when you get into competitive side, not just shooting different platforms, but shooting competitively, it is pretty awesome when you actually shoot some kind of a, in a match.
Yeah.
And then, and you lose, but it teaches you how to lose with grace, right?
Oh yeah.
Hold on.
It's chaos at the Steve house.
Yeah, they left the door open. Hold on. There we go.
No, you're good. One of the things, it also teaches you, I think, how to learn how to accept that there is always going to be somebody better than you. There's always going to be people.
Always is.
Yeah, and there's always going to be people worse than you, but you can learn from both kinds of people.
Yeah, and it's fun. And the other thing I've noticed, and there's a few competitive guys, and we talked about the tactical guys at the store, but there's always a few competitive guys that are kind of prima donnas and
sure, and
just a little too much. But for the most part, that's a small fraction. Like in my experience, when I've shot in some matches, the majority of them are just so willing to help and suggest good ideas, or even ammo. Like, here, shoot some of my ammo if you don't have enough. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that in a match. Like, hey, just here's some of my ammo. Shoot this.
Yeah, okay. The generosity of people is pretty cool. I mean, even just loaning firearms and gear and stuff if need be, and especially if you're like a first timer.
Yeah, they're all for it. That Sharps I have, the gentleman that owned it before did a lot of cowboy action shooting.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I mentioned to him, I was like, yeah, because I still think it'd be fun, but it's an expensive sport to get into.
Sure.
A lot of those cowboy guns can get pretty pricey.
Oh yeah.
But he's like, hey, why don't you come? I'll bring a couple guys that shoot with me. And we went out to the cowboy action range just north of me, not too far. Anyways, he let me shoot they set up a couple stages and he let me shoot them just for fun. I mean, it wasn't a real match, but just to see if I liked it. And I did love it. But
just to get familiar,
oh man, it's a lot of money to get involved into it.
Yeah, but the other thing it's fun too is getting a little bit of validation that your skills are there. I remember, the first couple times I did competitions and stuff was like, wow, I don't know if I'm going to do any good. Like I'm going to just suck the whole time and it's not going to be fun. Then it's like, oh, like even like under pressure, I can do this and I can shoot well and in front of other people even. And it's kind of nice and validating to know that you can, you can repeat the skills that you have in your mind when you're under the best of circumstances at the range, you know?
And your skills improve so much if you can get involved in competitive shooting. Even, I mean, you don't have to go to those big fancy matches. Like there's a lot of local matches that they're just fun.
Yeah.
And your skills will improve.
And even your local guns shop, you know, might have competitions. You know, I think, you know, we've had our competitions here and there. We used to have Hogan's Alley, which was super cool.
Yeah, we set up some of those again.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff. And, you know, it's just a matter of finding out when those are and going. And usually people are super friendly. So,
yeah,
you know, that kind of ties in the communication and the camaraderie about shooting, but also just, you know, expanding your skills and being willing to learn. I think that's kind of one of the things is that it's taught me is that you need to be willing to learn, and you're going to meet people who know a lot and just soak up all the info you can from them like a sponge.
Yeah. And don't be intimidated.
No.
Don't be intimidated about going. And even just to go and watch, like it is just fun to watch some of these people shoot.
Yeah, and you see it's funny because the really good people look like they're doing it in slow motion almost, or it's, you know, it's slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Yeah,
and you really do see people that look like they're kind of going slow, but they're really killing it.
Yeah, it makes me think of a good friend of mine here in Idaho Falls. He's a very seasoned shooter, Dave Cook, and he shoots single stack 1911s in USPSA. And
oh wow.
That old boy, he still shoots as fast as everybody else.
Yeah.
And he's not 100 years old, but he's in his, I bet he's mid 60s, maybe even close to 70.
Yeah, that's up there.
And he still rocks it. Like,
yeah,
he's amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
He and his boys are the same way. They're all, you know, his two sons are current police officers. He was a police officer for a long time. And they just shoot, and they shoot well.
Yeah, that's cool.
Tons of fun. I've learned a lot from that guy. He's kind of my mentor with some of this stuff.
Yeah, well, like you said, it's probably even just by watching. You know, you can get a lot of knowledge just by watching. So, but shifting over to like the actual guns themselves, one thing I've learned a lot is just kind of how things work, kind of like improving my mechanical mind, you know?
Okay,
I think that learning how kind of the science and the mechanics behind how firearms work has helped me kind of develop that part of my mind because, you know, my dad was a mechanic for, you know, 30, 40 years. He still is. He's got kind of an office job now, but like, that's what, you know, I grew up watching him do. And, you know, it never clicked when I was a kid, how cars worked and how engines worked and all that kind of stuff. I kind of learned a little bit the basics as I got older, but, you know, I think what really clicked for me with it was about, you know, learning about how firearms work and putting together an AR-15 and taking your guns apart to clean them and stuff. And just watching videos on that and, how everything operates. You can really, once you learn to kind of break it down into different steps and you can see what different components are doing, you know, it really does kind of train your mind to kind of be wired that way. If that's something you're interested in, and then you can apply that to other things, you know?
And it does really apply to everything else. One thing while you're talking made me think of something else was, not to steal your thunder, I guess. Sorry.
No, that was it.
I don't know if you're okay, but for me, and I've never been scared to try things. Like, I'm not scared to fail.
Right.
So, but it just kind of helped me reiterate things. Like, I working at the shop over there, I've had a chance to build some guns. You know, we talked about my 1911 that I built from a rough frame to cycling, which was a lot of work. And it was definitely outside of my wheelhouse. Like it's something I'd never thought I would do before. Like, before that, I would never even tear apart my 1911 to frame because it made me nervous.
Right.
But then to go and to build one, and I'm not scared to tear down a 1911 anymore, but also like Cerakoting or adding sights or whatever, like, it just helped me remember that it's okay to try. It's okay to fail to some extent. You know, most of the time you're not going to break anything unless you get really aggressive with it.
Yeah,
but
if it's in pieces,
it's fun
that's
that you
one
can
thing.
branch out a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say
But
the
it's okay to branch.
more that you dive in and the more that you learn and the more mistakes you make, the more comfortable you're going to be overall, I think, with doing things. Because I remember I've built what 3-4 ARs now.
Mm-hmm.
And, I remember the first one, I watched the same video, the same CMMG video like 16 times. Like, well, wait, how does it know which spring is which? But it's in this bag, but it's not supposed to be. Am I missing a piece? Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, and then now it's like, oh, I don't even need to watch the video. I can just do it. Like, you just learn eventually how you can, and it just becomes memory. And you become a lot more confident.
And it really is super simple. Like, even the 1911, I was just over worried about it. Like, it really is simple. You talk about the mechanics of things. If you open your mind a little bit and understand, like, oh, this has to go here in order to make this function properly, it's super helpful.
Yeah, exactly. And just knowing, I think it helps you more intimately know your firearms too, to where it's like, okay, this is happening because of this, or this should be a little bit smoother because of this. Maybe I didn't put it together the right way. Like, you just learn and you can learn by feel a lot more, I think.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, just the experience. It's worth the experience on its own. Even if you screw up the first time, that experience of growing is worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then going back to the responsibility and growing and stuff like that is just being safety conscious and learning to. But then this is more, I think, going back to RSO training. But I think everybody who wants to be more involved in firearms should take an RSO course, just because. Not only because Steve teaches one, but just because you realize it's one of those don't know what you don't know things. Because I think when especially as a new shooter, if you're going to the range for the first time, or maybe you're new and you have only gone a few times, you're concentrating on what you're doing, which you should be doing. But you're not necessarily concentrating or even noticing what other people are doing. And it kind of goes back to situational awareness a little bit, but, you just being an RSO and having that kind of training, you learn what other people are doing and what they should and shouldn't be doing. It's going to help when you take other people shooting, I think. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I know we've touched on this probably more than one episode, that even just out shooting with friends or family, like, learning what to look for. 'Cause like you said earlier, you don't know what you don't know, but, getting that safety conscious thing happening. And then going out and shooting with friends, you see things more often. You realize, oh, that muzzle shouldn't have swept me or whatever,
Right.
And then, but that still ties over to driving to work. Like, if you know what to look for and you realize, oh, that could be a hazard, you should be more safety conscious everywhere you are.
Yeah, you can get out of a situation more easily than if you know what's coming, rather than having to simply just react.
Right.
And that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Action's always faster.
Yeah. But also the kind of secondary consequence of being more safety minded and leading by example is that people, I'm trying to figure out the best way to put this, but people come to respect you more and trust you more as a resource for firearms. I think, especially when you're training new people and you're friendly to new people, whether, they're your friends or family or strangers. And that's, part of, I think, being a good steward of the Second Amendment.
Well, just the other day, like, a friend of mine, he shoots a little bit. He doesn't have a lot of guns. He's a big time hunter, but I mean, he just has a few guns because that's all he needs. Anyway, his dad, which I would never expect to ask about purchasing a gun, he asked me, "Hey, tell me about an AR-15. Like, what gun's good for defense? What handgun should I get?"
Yeah.
And this is a guy that, a couple of months ago, I asked him about it, and he, I'm joking, "Hey, when you going to get an AR?" And, "Oh no, I would never have one of those things in my house."
Really?
So you never know when things are going to change and people are going to be interested. And it was kind of nice that, he chose to come and ask me. Like, I felt actually rather humbled over it. I thought it was kind of cool to have him ask me. So
yeah, people
you never know.
Trust you as a resource, and they want to learn from you, and they want to, when they have a question, they'll come to you. Like, I had somebody call me the other day, actually, because him and his girlfriend were talking about guns, and his girlfriend had a question about, the process of buying a firearm. And they called me because they're like, well, you know more than anybody I know. So, we wanted to ask you. And because she was a little misinformed, she goes, well, wait, can anybody just buy a gun, no matter what? And I'm like, well, no, not really. There's all these, you have to fill out a 4473 and you can't be a felon, obviously, and blah, 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 blah. And, if you lie on the form, you'll get arrested and this, that, and the other. And, told her all the ways that you actually can't buy a firearm and that you can get denied for any reason. Even if you pass it.
You had to enlighten her, huh?
Yeah. But she's like, oh, okay. And I think she felt a little bit better about it. So
yeah, there's a lot of misinformation. We already know that, though.
Yeah, we've done our best to try to make sure that we share the right information as much as we can. So
well, that's awesome that you were able to teach her that way. I think that's cool.
Yeah, and then if I like the feeling that I can be a safe, non-judgmental, informative person for my friends, family, or whoever else has questions. Because even some of my family where they've said something they've either heard on the news or online or whatever, I'm like, well, actually, it's not the case. And it's really this.
Not quite accurate.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people like being more informed like that most of the time. Some people don't care, I guess, but
yeah, some people just have walls that don't want torn down.
Yeah, that's very true. So,
and I think you're pretty level-headed and open-minded. So I'm sure when they come to you with those conversations or questions, you're pretty good at helping them learn.
Oh, thanks. I try because I think sometimes, especially people that I don't know that I meet for the first time, and after a while they learn that I'm a firearm enthusiast and everything. They go, I never would have thought that you would have been, you know what I mean? Like, and not in a bad way. They're just surprised that that's something that somebody like a responsible, normal person like you owns guns. Yeah.
You're normal?
I guess.
That's hard to believe.
I guess that's how I come off to some people. So, but that always kind of puts a smile on my face, because then it kind of it really does dispel the myths that there's only gun nuts out there.
Well, we are crazy.
Yeah, that's true. So, that's kind of all I had on my list, though. I mean, it went by fast, but there's definitely a lot of things that, I think that at least being involved in firearms and being in the hobby has improved my life many different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll interest in guns and firearms and becoming a student in the firearms world will open your mind into different avenues and open doors that you never thought, and introduce you to fascinating people and the mechanics of guns. Like I say, we talked about a minute ago. I think that is fascinating, and there's a lot more to it than just shooting holes in paper.
Yeah, and more than just putting the bullets in and pulling the trigger too, as a matter of fact, as well.
Yeah, it will. I mean, we just identified a few different ways that it's outside of shooting that it's influenced our lives. I think it's pretty intriguing.
Yeah. So do you have any other ways or no?
No, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I'm sure something will pop up tonight. I'll be laying in bed like, oh, I should have talked about that.
Should have said that. Well, if you have any, make sure you let us know. podcast@iishooting.com or Facebook and Instagram at Range Minded Podcast. It's another great way to get a hold of us. And maybe Steve, you'll put maybe post it on Facebook. Maybe we'll get some good responses.
Yeah, we'll start a conversation. I'm going to do it right now.
You should. So, all right. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, guys, be safe.
Yeah, see ya. Thanks for listening to Range Minded. Find us online at Range Minded Podcast on Facebook, or send us an email at podcast@iishooting.com. We're always happy to get feedback, episode suggestions, whatever you want to send us, really. And be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and pretty much wherever else you get your podcasts from. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.